Today we are on day 4 of surface area and volume. We're going to be finishing up the surface area with spheres, and then we're going to kind of be easing our way into volume. So after this lesson, we're about at the halfway point. After this lesson, we will have a review and take a quiz, and then we've got about 3 more lessons and then finish up this unit as well. Again, just keep that formula sheet out because that formula sheet really is going to help you through most of the problems. And just a little bit of review, when we're talking about circles or spheres, we're talking about circles as well. So a few formulas, and these are on your formula sheet. Remember, your area of a circle is pi r squared, and your circumference of a circle is 2 pi r, or pi times the diameter. So number 1, they want us to find the area of a circle that has a radius of 6. So here's my formula. I'm simply going to go ahead and plug in that 6. And we've got 36 pi. This would be called exact form. So make sure you pay attention on Math Excel, whether they want exact form or whether they want it rounded to the nearest tenth. Let me grab my calculator and let's type in that nearest tenth as well. And we've got 36 pi, which is rounded to the nearest tenth would be 113.1. Number 2, they want us to find the circumference if we have a diameter of 5. So if we want to use that second formula, that would probably be the easiest. It's pi times 5. So again, in exact form, that would be 5 pi, or if they want it to the nearest tenth, let me put nearest tenth. So again, let's go ahead and type in 5 pi. And we come up with 15.7. Okay, number 3, now we're working backwards. For the first one, it wants us to find the radius if we have a circumference of 49 pi. So let's write down our formula. Circumference equals 2 pi r. We know our circumference is 49 pi. We are looking for the radius. So think about how would you find that radius? I'm going to divide by 2 pi. Now the nice part about this is those pi's will cancel out. So our radius is simply 49 divided by 2, which is 24.5. Let's look at the second one. They want us to find a radius, and we have an area of 98 pi. Again, let's put down our formula. Area equals pi r squared. We've got 98 pi equals pi r squared. So again, how do we get r squared to begin with by itself? We're going to divide by pi. We get r squared is equal to 98. Which means r is equal to radical 98. And again, similar to up there, we might have 2 options for writing that answer. The easiest one would be write it as a decimal. So the square root ends up being 9.9. Or if they wanted it in simplest radical form, I'm going to come over here. 98 factors down to 49 and 2, which means in radical form, my radius is 7 radical 2. So all of that is in 2-dimension, but as we said, this unit we're working in 3-dimension. So now we're moving on to a sphere. And a sphere is defined as a set of points equidistant from the center. And obviously in this case, we're talking 3-dimensional. So I can go left, right, up, down, I can come forward, I can come backward, and that set distance is that radius. So let's go ahead and label a few things. This point they're talking here is the center of that sphere. If you look at this, it looks like it's been labeled to be D, which would be your diameter. You can see here, R is your radius. This part right here is corresponding to, they call it the, I think it's called the great circumference, but for us, let's just go ahead and call it the circumference. And again, all of those vocabulary are associated with a sphere. And if you look at your formula sheet for sphere, let me go ahead and grab that. It's down here. We don't have a lateral area for a sphere. We have the surface area, which is 4 pi r squared, and we have the volume, which was 4/3 pi r cubed. The sphere tends to be relatively easy because there's only one dimension, and that is the radius. So there's your two formulas there. Okay, number one, they want us to find the volume and they want us to leave our answer in terms of pi. So again, our volume is 4/3 pi r cubed. We've got 4/3 pi. The only small calculation is I've been given the diameter, which means my radius is 15. So again, I'm just going to cast that pi off to the side. Now, I know your calculator is a little bit different, but for the most part, we'll still be able to show you how I do my calculations. So I'm going to type in 4/3 as 4 divided by 3 times 15. Now the question is, I have to raise it to the third power. Let me get that glare off a little bit and let me zoom in for you for just a moment as well. So to get any power, I'm going to use that caret button. So you want to go look for that caret button, which is not showing up on here. I'll write it in for you and I'm going to type it to the third power. And there's our answer. So again, let me just show you the keystrokes on your calculator. You would have 4 divided by 3 times 15, and the caret button looks like the following to the third power. When we type that in, we get 4,500 pi, and that would be centimeters cubed since we're talking volume. All right, the next one, they want us to find the surface area, and it looks like I left off part of the directions. They want us to leave it in terms of pi, but also give it to a second way would be to the nearest decimal. So let's write down our formula. Surface area is equal to 4 pi r squared. Again, in this case, our radius would be 7. So let's cast off that pi and type in the remaining part. We've got 4 times 7 to the second. We get 196 pi. Or if they wanted it as a decimal, we would type in that 196 times pi, and we end up with 615.8. And that is inches squared. Okay, now 3 and 4 are not as straightforward. 1 and 2 are pretty easy. You just plug it in, make sure you're paying attention to whether it's to the pi or to the nearest tenth. And I think actually let's go down and do number 4 because I think it's a little bit easier to start with. They want us to find the surface area. So let's put down that formula. That is 4 pi r squared. I don't have the radius in front of me, but we did a problem similar to this on the front. I've been given the circumference, so I need to use that to help me find the radius and eventually find the surface area. So let's come over here. I'm going to put down that circumference formula. I'm going to substitute in the 18, and I'm going to go and solve for r. So I'm dividing by 2 pi. Now, 2 ways you can do this. First of all, you could recognize 18 divided by 2 is equal to 9, and you could type in 9 divided by pi. Or your second option is we could type in this on our calculator. Now, you have to be a little bit careful. I'm typing in 18 divided by, and here's what you need to be careful with. We have to put parentheses around that 2 pi. And let me give you a second just to get caught up and see where I'm at. Again, if you're going to type in this whole thing, you've got to put parentheses around the 2 pi. Or if you went ahead and divided the 18 by 2 and you get 9, take a look. 9 divided by pi should you give me that same radius of 2.86. Now we're going to keep it out a few decimals because we need to be as accurate as we can. I'm going to keep that out to 4 decimal places. So I've got 2.8648. Now we have showed you that answer button, so we could use that in this particular case as well to make it even more accurate. In other words, I could type in 4 times pi times my answer squared. Again, I did 4 times pi times my answer squared, and we come up with 103.1. If you don't like the answer button, we can still do it that way. 4 times pi, and I'm just going to keep out that 2.8648 and square that, and hopefully I'm going to come up with something pretty close to 103. And I do. So again, whatever your comfort level is using that answer button, or if you don't want to use the answer button, just make sure you leave out enough decimal places. We're talking surface area, so that would just be inches squared. Okay, the third one is probably the most difficult. If I skim through it again, I'm looking for surface area, which is 4 pi r squared. But I've been given the volume, so let's write down that formula. 4/3 times pi r cubed, and I know what that volume is. So here's the tricky part. We're back to some Algebra 1, and we have to go and solve this. Well, the first thing I see is I need to get rid of the 4/3. You can either divide by 4/3, or I believe most of you ended up multiplying by the reciprocal. So in other words, when I just grab my marker, I'm going to multiply by 3/4 here and here. So that means all of that cancels out on that side, and we are left with pi r cubed. Now I'm going to go deal with this 3/4 times 4,200, and we get 3,150. Okay, still not done. I need to get r cubed by itself, so I'm going to go and divide by pi. So let's go ahead and just divide it by pi. And we get r cubed is 1,02676. Okay, here's the last part I'm not sure you remember from Algebra 1. We need to go and take the cube root of r cubed. And again, your calculator is a little bit different, but it's still going to be basically the same steps. I'm going to go ahead and clear this out. I'm going to type in 3. And then along this first column, you should see a button that looks like the following. And I basically am telling I want that x value to be a 3. In other words, I want to take the cube root of that number. So there we go. I've got the cube root. Let me turn this off, see if that doesn't help with the glare a little bit. Let me go ahead and zoom in for us too. And I can actually use my answer button there too. That didn't help out. Let's go over here. There we go. That's a little bit better. So I can type in the cube root of that answer, and I get my radius is really about 10. Let's go ahead and take out a couple decimal places. Now again, if you don't like to use that answer button, we type in again that 3. You go and find that x to the n button. And you could type in your 1002.67, and again, coming up with something pretty close. Okay, now we're ready to finish up this problem. Remember, the whole goal was we had to go find the radius so that ultimately we can find the surface area. So here we go. We've got 4 pi. Our radius ended up being 10.0089 raised to the second power. And again, if you have it stored in there, we can use that answer button if you want. We've got 4 pi times my answer to the second power. Again, if you don't like the answer button, just make sure you keep out enough decimal places. And finally, we get 1,258.9. And if we are talking surface area, again, that is feet squared. Okay, let me know if you have any questions, or if you do, you can always get on a Zoom later on and we can hit some of those questions, or feel free to send me an email and I can help you out that way as well. Keep up the good work. We are halfway done with this unit.